The Hargrove family had long dreamed of renovating their old Victorian home. Nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the house was a fixer-upper with plenty of charm but needed a lot of work. Every weekend, Jack and Emily Hargrove, along with their 2 teenage children, Sam and Lily, dedicated themselves to the project, envisioning the day their home would be fully restored to its former glory. One sunny Saturday, the family decided to tackle the backyard, which had become overgrown with weeds and brush. They planned to turn the neglected space into a lush garden, a sanctuary where they could relax and enjoy family time. Armed with shovels, rakes, and a wheelbarrow, they began the laborious task of clearing the area. As the afternoon sun beat down on them, Jack's shovel struck something solid. At first, he thought it was just a large rock, but as he dug further, he realized it was something else entirely. Calling the family over, they gathered around the spot, curiosity piqued. Together, they unearthed an old rusted metal box, its surface caked with dirt and grime. Emily carefully pried open the box, revealing its contents: a stack of faded photographs, a few yellowed letters, and a small weathered journal. The photographs, though worn, clearly depicted scenes from the early 1900s. The letters were written in elegant, cursive handwriting, and the journal was filled with meticulous entries detailing the daily life of a young woman named Clara. As they sat in the shade of a large oak tree, the Hargroves began to read Clara's journal. Her entries started innocently enough, describing her love for the house, her passion for gardening, and her dreams for the future. However, as they delved deeper, a darker story emerged. Clara wrote about a man who had been watching her, following her every move. She described how he would leave flowers on her doorstep, watch her from a distance, and even try to talk to her when she was alone. The journal entries became increasingly desperate, with Clara detailing her growing fear and sense of being trapped. The final entry, dated June 12, 1910, was especially chilling. Clara wrote that she could feel the man's presence everywhere she went, and she feared that he would harm her. She pleaded for anyone who might find her journal to understand her plight and bring her story to light. As the Hargroves finished reading the final entry, a heavy silence fell over them. They realized they had stumbled upon a piece of their home's dark history, a story that had been buried for over a century. Disturbed by the journal, they decided to dig further in the area where the box had been buried, hoping to uncover more clues about Clara's fate. To their horror, as they continued to dig, they unearthed a set of human bones wrapped in a tattered, decaying dress. It didn't take long for them to realize they had found Clara's unmarked grave. The discovery left them shaken and unsure of what to do next. They immediately called the police, hoping to bring justice to the long-forgotten victim. The authorities arrived and cordoned off the area, treating it as a crime scene. Forensic experts confirmed that the remains were indeed those of a young woman from the early 1900s. As the investigation progressed, the Hargroves began to notice strange occurrences around their home. Objects were moved, and they heard footsteps at night. They dismissed these as their imagination running wild until the threats began. That night, as the family sat together in the living room, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had disturbed something that was meant to remain hidden. The once peaceful home now seemed to harbor an eerie presence, and the Hargroves realized that uncovering Clara's story was only the beginning of their ordeal. The Hargroves struggled to shake off the chilling discovery of Clara's grave. Though they hoped the police investigation would bring some clarity, the initial findings only deepened the mystery. The authorities confirmed that Clara's remains had likely been buried for over a century, but they had no leads on the identity of her stalker or the circumstances surrounding her death. Meanwhile, the Hargroves' home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a place of foreboding. Determined to understand what had happened, Emily began to delve deeper into local history, spending hours at the library and poring over old newspapers and public records. She discovered that Clara Hastings had indeed lived in their house in the early 1900s, but there were few other records about her life or her tragic end. The town's archives held no mention of a missing person case or any reports that might explain her untimely demise. Jack, on the other hand, took a more hands-on approach. He continued to search their property for any additional clues. One evening, while exploring the basement, he stumbled upon an old concealed door behind a stack of dusty crates. The door was locked, but with some effort, he managed to pry it open. Inside, he found a small hidden room that seemed to have been untouched for decades. The room contained a few pieces of antique furniture and a large ornate mirror that had been draped with a thick, dark cloth. As Jack examined the room, he noticed scratches on the wooden floor and strange markings on the walls. These markings resembled the symbols the family had seen on the items in the rusted box. It was clear that whoever had used this room had been deeply disturbed. The more Jack looked around, the stronger his sense of unease grew. He quickly left the basement, locking the door behind him, and shared his findings with Emily and the children. That night, the strange occurrences around the house intensified. Doors that had been securely closed were found wide open. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hallways, but no one was there. Sam and Lily reported hearing whispers in their rooms, voices too faint to understand, but unsettling nonetheless. The family began to feel as though they were being watched, their every move scrutinized by an unseen presence. Things took a more sinister turn when Emily found a threatening note on their doorstep. Written in old-fashioned script, the note warned the family to stop their investigation and leave the past alone. The chilling message was clear. Someone wanted Clara's story to remain buried. Fear gripped the Hargroves as they realized they were dealing with a dangerous individual, possibly the same person who had been tormenting Clara over a century ago, or perhaps a descendant intent on keeping the family secret. Despite the fear, the Hargroves felt a growing resolve to uncover the truth. They reached out to a local historian, Dr. Benjamin Whitmore, who specialized in the town's darker history. Dr. Whitmore eagerly agreed to help, intrigued by the mystery. Together, they combed through more historical documents and old maps of the property. They discovered that the house had once been part of a larger estate, owned by a wealthy and influential family with ties to the town's founding. As they pieced together the history, a disturbing pattern emerged. The original owner of the estate, Jonathan Blackwood, had been a prominent figure with a reputation for eccentricity and cruelty. Rumors suggested that Blackwood had an unhealthy obsession with a young woman named Clara Hastings. The historian theorized that Blackwood's obsession had turned deadly, leading to Clara's untimely demise and subsequent cover-up. The Blackwood family had then gone to great lengths to erase any trace of Clara's existence. With this new information, the Hargroves and Dr. Whitmore felt they were getting closer to the truth. However, they also realized that their investigation had put them in grave danger. The threats and strange occurrences were not mere coincidences. Someone was actively trying to stop them. Determined to see justice done, they decided to continue their search, unaware that their efforts would soon bring them face to face with a peril far greater than they had ever imagined. As the investigation intensified, the Hargroves' sense of unease grew into palpable fear. Their home, once a sanctuary of warmth and love, now felt like a labyrinth of shadows and secrets. The past seemed to bleed into the present, each new discovery tightening the noose around their collective sense of safety. One evening, as Jack was returning from a late meeting with Dr. Whitmore, he noticed a dark figure lurking near the edge of their property. The figure vanished into the woods before Jack could confront them, leaving behind only a sense of dread. He rushed inside, locking the doors and windows, and shared his encounter with Emily. The children, sensing the rising tension, huddled close, their young minds struggling to understand the fear that now permeated their home. Dr. Whitmore, alarmed by the escalating threats, suggested that the family take temporary refuge elsewhere. However, the Hargroves, resolute in their quest for the truth, decided to stay. They fortified their home as best they could, installing extra locks and motion sensor lights. Jack even borrowed a firearm from a friend, hoping the sight of it might deter any would-be intruders. Late one night, while Emily was reviewing old photographs in the study, she heard a faint rhythmic tapping coming from the basement. Her heart pounded in her chest as she followed the sound, flashlight in hand. The tapping grew louder as she descended the stairs, leading her to the concealed door Jack had discovered. Taking a deep breath, she unlocked the door and stepped inside the hidden room. The room was colder than the rest of the basement, the air thick with the scent of damp and decay. Emily's flashlight beam swept across the room, revealing the old furniture and the covered mirror. The tapping seemed to emanate from behind the mirror. With trembling hands, she pulled away the cloth, revealing the mirror's ornate frame and dusty surface. As she leaned in closer, she noticed something scratched into the glass, a series of numbers. Emily hurried back upstairs to share her discovery with Jack. Together, they deciphered the numbers, which turned out to be a date and coordinates. The date corresponded to the day Clara had gone missing, and the coordinates pointed to a location deep within the forest behind their house. Despite their fear, they knew they had to investigate. The next morning, the family, accompanied by Dr. Whitmore, ventured into the woods. The forest was dense, the thick canopy blocking out much of the sunlight and casting eerie shadows on the ground. They followed the coordinates, their anxiety mounting with each step. After what felt like hours, they arrived at a small, overgrown clearing. At the center stood an old, weathered stone marked with the same symbols they had seen before. As they examined the stone, a sudden rustling in the bushes caught their attention. They turned to see a man emerging from the undergrowth, his face twisted with rage. It was evident that he had been watching them for some time. The man, later identified as a descendant of Jonathan Blackwood, had been obsessively guarding the secret of Clara's grave, driven by a twisted sense of family honor. Without warning, the man lunged at them. Jack, drawing his borrowed firearm, shouted a warning, but the man was undeterred. A struggle ensued, during which the man revealed his intent to silence anyone who threatened to expose his family's dark past. In the chaos, the gun discharged, and the man fell to the ground, mortally wounded. Shaken but resolute, the Hargroves and Dr. Whitmore contacted the authorities once more. This time, with the man's death and the evidence they had gathered, the police took their claims seriously. An extensive search of the Blackwood estate and surrounding area uncovered more evidence of the family's sinister history, including documents detailing Jonathan Blackwood's obsession with Clara and the lengths to which the family had gone to cover up her death. Despite the danger they had faced, the Hargroves felt a sense of closure. Clara's story had finally been brought to light, and the Blackwood family's reign of terror was over. However, the ordeal had left its mark on the family. The children, though resilient, bore the emotional scars of their harrowing experience. Jack and Emily, too, felt the weight of what they had endured. As they stood together in the clearing, the sun setting behind them, they knew they had done the right thing. Clara Hastings could finally rest in peace, her story no longer a dark secret buried in the past. The Hargroves, though forever changed, found solace in the truth they had uncovered, vowing to honor Clara's memory and the courage it took to bring her justice. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room, Emily received a phone call from Dr. Whitmore. She had been going through the final pieces of evidence and had discovered something that might bring them some closure. She asked them to meet her at the local library the next day. Curious and a little apprehensive, the Hargroves arrived at the library the following morning. Dr. Whitmore greeted them warmly and led them to a private room where she had set up a series of documents and photographs. She explained that she had found Clara's personal diary among the Blackwood family's belongings. The diary provided a detailed account of Clara's life, her dreams, and her fears. As they read through the diary, the Hargroves learned about Clara's aspirations to become a teacher and her love for literature. They also discovered her deep sense of isolation and the fear she felt living in the Blackwood household. Clara had written about Jonathan's obsession and the control he exerted over her, expressing a desperate hope that someone would one day uncover the truth. The final entry in Clara's diary was written on the day of her death. In it, she expressed her resignation to her fate, but also a glimmer of hope that her story would one day be told. The Hargroves were moved to tears, feeling a profound connection to the young woman they had never met, but whose life they had fought so hard to honor. As they closed the diary, Dr. Whitmore handed them a small, ornate locket she had found among Clara's belongings. Inside was a faded photograph of Clara as a child, her eyes full of life and innocence. The Hargroves decided to keep the locket as a symbol of their journey and a reminder of the courage it took to uncover the truth. In the months that followed, the Hargroves slowly began to heal. They attended therapy sessions as a family, learning to cope with their trauma and support one another. The memorial for Clara was completed, and the town held a ceremony to honor her memory. The Hargroves were invited to speak at the event, sharing their story and the importance of seeking justice and truth. Though the experience had changed them forever, the Hargroves found a renewed sense of purpose. They became advocates for historical preservation and victims' rights, using their platform to raise awareness about the importance of uncovering and acknowledging the past. Their journey had been fraught with danger and heartache, but it had also brought them closer together and given them a mission that extended beyond their own lives. As they stood by Clara's memorial, the sun shining brightly overhead, they felt a sense of peace. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. Clara's story had been told, and her spirit could finally rest. The Hargroves, forever changed by their ordeal, looked forward to a future filled with hope knowing that they had made a difference.